Hey, what's up? It's been a while. I wanted to film a quick video, just get things off my chest. It's gonna be a bit of a random rant, but hopefully I'm just gonna circle around a big general topic, and that topic is mainly just how things have changed. How life itself, when we wake up in the morning and go outside, feels very different than it did in recent years and in less than recent years. Earlier tonight, I was watching a video, this is what motivated me to film this, about a guy playing guitar and just talking about how he feels things have changed since even 2016. And granted, while I really relate with what he was saying, he and I were both quite a bit younger at that time. Our brains were in different states, we had different, chemical makeup or what have you. And that kind of youth is really going to shape our perspective, but how much that youth changes our perspective of the world compared to other factors, I'm not really sure. I know that's going to be a big aspect to this, is my own personal subjectivity, but I have a feeling that if you're watching this, you feel it too. And it's not only subjective and perceptive. I mean, there are a lot of objective differences in that last 8 years or so, and how things have changed, and I have my theories as well. So I'm going to begin to start circling this subject, and I may go off on some tangents here. But one thing I feel is things may be different just because and this guy was mentioning this as well, the sense that there's not as much life just in our environment or in our minds or what have you. And I wonder that as the population is growing at a certain rate, that there has been quite a dip. There has been quite a dip in recent years, and I don't really want to get too much into that, but I think I reckon it's from a bit of a virus. And when I say that, I mean more of a virus of information, more than one floating around, but I'm not going to touch that subject too much. But mainly the sense that perhaps on the subtle levels, there's less life energy in our world, on the collective, less chi, less organ, less prana, whatever you want to call it, and that's infecting our environment. Just to simply put this in perspective, to make a point here, if you're living with someone, chances are you're going to hear them around the house. Dishes are going to be dirty, the kitchen will get used, and hopefully the kitchen gets cleaned. Without your doing, you're going to hear them play maybe music or listen to things, or you're going to hear them talk. Chances are you're going to interact with them if you're living with them, right? But if they leave, that won't be the case. There's going to be no change on their part. And while that's a very gross example, and I mean gross as material, physical, I think there are also more subtle factors that we do pick up on, and often it's subconscious, if not unconscious. We feel the presence of life, and thus we can pick up on the lack thereof. I think that's a factor. But that's not something I have empirical evidence of. It's also, of course, this guy was making the point that how we've been interacting with technology and how we spend our time, how we entertain ourselves is very, very different than it was 10 years ago, of course, 20, absolutely. Things have really changed. And with the advent of the internet and our cell phones and our wireless radiation, the ways we spend our times were not how they used to be. And prior to these advents, we didn't really want them. At least we didn't know that we wanted them because they didn't exist in our lives, and we seemed to get along just fine without them. And it can be such a chain to feel that we have to have this with us, because then we have it around and it takes up so much more of our time than it ever needs to. And that's, I'm pointing 3 fingers back at myself. I'm guilty of this as well, for wasting time and getting lost in this distracting, of course, in these black scrying mirrors that have really not connected us as much as we would want to be. That's definitely another factor. I have a feeling, and again, it's not empirical, but if you go back 20, 30, 40 years, there is so much more just magic. I have this feeling like in every fiber of my being that, and I lived in some of these times. I mean, I experienced this in my youth, and again, maybe it's just my youth. Maybe it's just the subjective change from being a child and how you see the world. Of course, that's a big part of it. But the fact that like even times when I was not existing on this world, when I was not alive, that there was so much magic, not only just physically, aesthetically, how people moved and interacted, but just on the subtler levels. It's as if that even those that were pessimistic and going through hard times, it's almost like there was this underlying optimism. And that, well, I wonder, is that an illusion? Were we more caught up in an illusion that we're just not, or at least personally, am I just not as caught in an illusion as I was in my youth? Because I was such a dreamer, always seeing a more beautiful perception of what could be. Just when I walk on the street, always wanting to go to somewhere more beautiful. And then the weight of the reality that comes from growing up has really, really nearly snuffed that out, right? I don't know how to really express it, but even the dreams that I aspired for, the things I wanted to see in the world that were just potentials, the hopes, the aesthetic visions, I don't feel as affected by them as I used to. And it really, really like fucking stirs something up in me that I don't feel the way I used to, because, well, it's hard to say, but the sense of death, the sense that this environment is so, that the hopelessness, the weight, and I know it's so negative, but that's what I gotta get off my chest, is that degree of not only strain, but what is in Hindu philosophy, there's like 3 levels of existence. There's the death ignorance level, then there's the balanced goodness life level, and then there's the passion level. And we are still moving in all 3 of these in life, but that sense that there's so much more of that tamas, I think, the death ignorance level, where we as a people are not expressing as much life out into the world as we used to in prior decades. And I think that's a big factor, and that kind of that carries on to my next point of how I very strongly believe that we are manifestors, and we do manifest from our beliefs and our speech, and of course from our actions, and I can get into all that. Doesn't mean just sit and hope that you can move a can of soda off your coffee table with your mind, but the fact that you can move your arms with your mind just as phenomenologically, or that's not the right word, I don't think, but it's such a phenomenon that we can actually just move our bodies with our will and then manifest the change we wish to see. But we don't think of that as magical. We want to just make everything happen by some sort of unexplainable whim. But even doing those things at its core and being alive is unexplainable, but I digress. The fact is, we're manifestors. We have change in what we say, and of course in what we believe. And I think when there's that collective belief, when collective negativity overtakes things, it's going to have an influence. You're going to see an expression of how we are thinking and feeling in our environment. So when you hear so many people just, oh, the world's ending, just this negativity that's really like, we do not have a foundation for. We have things that we then start to see expressing that, but at its core, we don't even know what we're really saying. So we're just seeing an expression that looks closer to that representation, but we really have no idea what we're talking about. And we get in on our, I don't want to say it, but the fact is, when there's a collective optimism, when there's collective positivity, I don't want us to be delusional here. And I'm not saying we shouldn't acknowledge dark truths. That's what this video is about, right? But for us to have some optimism and not just speak ills into the world and speak curses and have a lack of faith and put bad fate into the air, if we can work on that, I believe that's a huge proponent of change. I believe that when people come together and groups come together that have like minds and like motives and like beliefs, and we propagate that, at least in that small circle, you will see some pretty profound change. So I'm going to carry this to my other topic that circles this whole, why are things so different? What's going on? I feel it every single day. Am I dealing with heavy depression? Why am I dealing with that like at least once a week for a whole day? Or at least like, it could be even more often than that. I don't keep track, but it seems like every week there's just such a fucking strain. It's intense, and I take good care of my health, and I'm fucking diligent. And I'm trying to account every factor, but it's more than that. It's spiritual. It's of the etheric. I know it to be true. I feel it in every fiber of my being. It's not about just the physical aspects, but those are necessary expressions. You can't just have something present in spirit without a physical counterpart. I believe that there's always going to be a union between the two. And the physical I can touch on more, so I'm going to go into aesthetics. And I believe that art, aesthetic, physical beauty, that is an expression, a window into the divine that is very important. That has been one of the things that has been the closest connection to divinity for me. And I don't want to go too personal about this, but my issue was I felt that was meaningless and a distraction, and that beauty is just, Lucifer and is nothing good, and is just a lie, that it's just surface. And I've really come back around and realized that it's so important. Musical beauty, artistic beauty, physical beauty, while they can deceive us to some degree, and of course they do, it is very important. It has a huge effect on the soul when we can incorporate beauty from an earnest standpoint of good intention. When we use beauty with good intention, it has good results. And aesthetically, I don't know if you've seen it, but most modern architecture, most things that get built up, I feel like I'm walking past one right now. It's like a fucking cinder block with windows, right? I mean, the modern like stucco buildings that are painted either just like plain white or dark gray or something in between, and the inside is like white tiles and like chrome or brushed metal. It's all that weird like sleekness. The more modern cars, and I won't say the brand names, but a lot of them have that like really just everything has to be like a sleek sheen kind of look to it. I feel like it came about, I started seeing it in like 2010s or like late 2000s. The whole like smartphones with the shiny black screen and everything was like started to become that aesthetic. And maybe it was cool for a time initially, but it's like it's stuck around so long. I've said like it's so sleek that it's bleak. I coined that term, I think like early 2010s or something. I was seeing so much of this aesthetic that's like, sure, it's a little sleek, but there's nothing to it, right? And now there's a whole lot of like LED lights out on the streets, and people are putting them up during the holidays. It's all these LED lights. I mean, I don't know about you, but they affect my consciousness. And they affect our body and our cells in ways that are not favorable, especially compared to real lights, like candlelight, incandescent. Sunlight, of course, moonlight, real lighting, how that affects the soul, and good aromas. These are things that we, of course, can be conscious of, but a lot of the times we're unconscious of how they're affecting us emotionally or physiologically. And when we're careless, when we're not expressing life into this world and putting care into our aesthetic environment, it's going to affect us negatively. It's going to affect us really, really, really negatively if we're careless. And what I see is so much carelessness in the world that we're building. Because again, we are the manifestors. Now, we have a lot of things weighing on us and making things difficult, like our current economy, like the fear that pervades and needs the technology. It needs the technology to pervade. If it wasn't around, if no one was on their phones, if no one had internet connection, of course, that'd be a hugely different environment. But you and I both know there wouldn't have been certain changes in recent years. So yeah, there's a lot of topics on why things feel different, and I know that, I know I feel it, and I know that if you're watching, there's a good chance you feel that things are different. And that guy that motivated me to make this video, who was talking about this how he felt things changed since 2016. I mean, one thing he mentioned was like he has a guitar with him. He was playing his guitar, and he said it's hard to just play and just vibe out because of the sense that there's just like everything's so dead. And I know that it's so like the difficulty to achieve my purpose and be my fullest self. Like, I mean, I'm doing my best to take care of the physiological aspect of that so that I'm not drained of testosterone and passion and energy in my body. But even then, like, that doesn't account for the full picture, because there's that thing that weighing on the soul of like, what am I working for? If I were in like prior decades, that pursuit feels like there'd be more life to it. And maybe it's just how the industry of music and art has changed, and how we have to like promote ourselves on the internet and all this gobbledygook. But also just the collective conscious, the difference in the collective conscious that's really affected all this. I think that's a huge factor. So yeah, I mean, it's all these different aspects are just like limbs on this beast that I'm trying to tackle here. And it seems there's some people that are going along just like nothing is different, and they're enjoying it. Maybe they're successful and they're doing a lot of good and they're really positive people. But I often find, and I'm gonna dig into this here, I often find that like I can't really connect with them. And one thing I want to talk about is maybe that's to some degree, again, it's my own subjectivity. Perhaps my own issues and traumas make it hard for me to positively connect with certain people that I'm different from. But I don't think it's just that. I don't think it's that. It's like I know people who I have amazing connections with, and there's so much positivity between us, and we're just like, there's so much joy that gets evoked between us. But we have a sense of things aren't right. We're not going along. We can't take part in the kind of just carefree fun the way other people do. So that affirms to me that it's not just my own like traumas or something. There's a lot of people though, however, that just like, it looks like they pretty much got it together, but there's like a disconnect. Even if we're talking about mundane things, it's why it's been hard for me to have like a social life that's been broad stretching. Because it's just like there's so many people that just, I don't want to get too much into my work, but I meet a lot of people. And I even then I can enjoy a lot of conversations, but there's just like, you can only go so far. So that's a trick. I think that's also just an aspect of this whole environmental change, but it's also playing a role. It's a symptom, but also a cause. It's the fact that there's a lot of people that are just not concerned. And I don't want to be like paranoid. I know this video is a heavy-handed topic, but it's me getting this off my chest. And my God, it does help to speak about it. Let me tell you, I think that's like one of the very first things we should start doing, is have the confidence to just start opening up about the things that are affecting us, that might make us sound like paranoid or what have you, because you can start to create better bonds with people that, you can see who agrees with you, see who's not able to compromise or what have you. Like, they say like, be your authentic self, and the people that are meant for you will come around and magnetize, and the people that aren't will, cut themselves off. And I think that's a big part of it, is we have to act in our authenticity, because it's not hopeless. Like again, our life and what we do affects the entire world. You affect the world. I affect the world. There's no question. The fact that I'm like making this YouTube video and putting it out into the world, if I keep it up on the internet, God knows it could be in this world for millennia. Who knows? It's gonna have its place in the world. This will perturbate out. It'll vibrate out into the world. Oh, that reminds me of another topic I want to talk about, is the perturbations, the vibrations, the subtle vibrations happening at every moment in our present universe, in our current environment, where you are right now, are not what they used to be 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20, of course. as far back as you want to go, we did not have the same high frequency radiation and vibrations that are affecting us. There's no question. We don't really pick up on these things consciously. They don't touch our five senses, at least maybe very, very, very subtly. So they don't really come to our attention. But I feel very strongly they have an enormous effect on our consciousness, our feelings, our well-being. And I believe there's some science to back this up. But I'm not going to say I have the papers on me right now. But I think there are a lot of people are waking up and shielding themselves as best they can and being a lot more careful and mitigating the use of our, what we use to entertain ourselves and communicate with others, and be a lot more careful, because those subtle vibrations were not present in the world, and I think they've made a huge change. Toxicity, quality of food, of course. You need to be on top of that. Think about the air you're breathing. Is it really clean? Is the water you're drinking really clean? Is the food you're eating really clean? Are the thoughts you're thinking really clean? Are they benefiting you? I know some of the thoughts I'm thinking aren't, and I'm working on it. I feel like I'm working on that every single day of my life, to have thoughts that are helpful. Because, spiraling into the negativity and feeling like the world isn't right, that's a tough one. You can't let that affect you. Much like a ship, no matter how stormy it is, if you don't let any of that water into the boat, it won't sink. It'll pass through the storm, and it'll float above the depths. And we all have that ability to float above whatever's happening to us, to be stronger than our environment. It's a very miraculous thing. But we also have to assess it. We have to assess the storm as to properly make our voyage. If we really want to get our course corrected and get to a destination that we find desirable, we have to think. We have to figure out, what is that destination? Where is it? How do we get there? And the storm may not have been accounted for. It may have been an obstacle that we did not foresee. And it's quite an obstacle, is it not? But again, there is a way through. It may be a very narrow way. It may be only a single way, right? But there is a way for us to reach our destination. And it is a gift just to connect with even the vision, the potential for what life could be. I mean, that's one of the most powerful things that's carried me through this entire life. I want to come back to that, how much of a dreamer I was, how much potential I see. And actually, very recently, I do feel some reconnection to that beauty, that vision of things. There's beauty here. And when I do see it, it's in the physical world. I feel like it's glimpses. It's small glimpses in small contained environments, but it's there. And it's usually a very natural force, a force of the earth. It's a force of harmony. And it's of course good aesthetics, I think, is a big part of it. Good intention and beauty. I think when there's living beings that have that, and it's a powerful degree of that, it really makes itself known in the physical. When there's people who are negative, living negative lives, of course, you look at their environment, and what's there aesthetically is often pretty negative and can have a pretty sour effect on us. So, yeah, it's hard. There's so many factors into why we feel the way we do. Think about even black mold. If you have black mold in your home, or things you're could be breathing in that are neurotoxins. If you're wasting your energy on something, if you're staring into a screen, if you're putting something in your body that's giving you too much dopamine all at once, or it's causing you to lose nutrients, those are huge issues, man. I could get into all those things, because if they damage the brain and give us pleasure, then they give us less of a connection to why we should stop, because we lose that faculty and we gain the immediate pleasure, so we only feel more of a reason to keep doing it, right? But these are huge issues that only divert us. But I don't think I'm telling you anything new. I don't think I'm telling you anything you don't already know and have known intuitively. So yeah, it's deep. It's a lot to assess right now. But this is spring. This is the springing up of a new year, and we've been dealing with a lot of BS lately, a lot of insanity, and I know I'm not alone in feeling the way I feel. There are definitely others out there who understand where I'm coming from, as much of a word soup I might be spilling out. I hope people really do get the meat of it, and they know what I'm cooking here. But yeah, and some people won't, of course, but we're alive, we have purpose, we have a reason to be here. And I know that there's so much that tries to crash down that feeling and not have us affirm that, but I think if you really take the time to find that in yourself, it's there, no question. And you can. That makes me want to go off on another topic about how, like, when we're depressed, our thinking caters to it. And the depression might be because you ate something bad. It could really be because, like, your chemicals, you're lacking vitamin D, or there could be tons of factors that are just plainly physiological. But our thinking then kind of just follows suit with our negative feeling, and then we make up explanations that affirm negativity. Whereas when we're really happy, we just think in a positive way, right? Now, there is great insight to be had when you're in a negative state. We come to interesting conclusions that almost seem more true than positive. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but when you're in a really negative state, often we find reasons to stay, and we find reasons to explain that our negativity is a more correct stance to take than the positivity, right? But if we end up just feeling positive and genuinely positive, we embrace that, and we realize we don't need logical explanation. We need the course to be corrected. We need ourselves in a harmonious state, and we realize that's more important. So that's one thing to really work on, because I still deal with a lot of really heavy, I don't want to say like depression or just depression. I've dealt with like bouts of like fucking misery, bouts of agitation and just fury. I've dealt with those things, and I feel like as I've worked through this, I'm better now at my thoughts. Even if my feelings are severely difficult, let me get across the road here. Even if my feelings are really, really severely negative, I'm a bit better at keeping my thinking positive and realizing I don't need to come into some thought spiral that's just negative and hateful and affirms my victimhood. I'm a lot better at that. And when it comes to like anger, that could have a lot to do with like chemicals and testosterone or whatever. But that's a powerful thing. If you can channel your fury, your agitation, if you can really work on channeling that in a positive way, even when you're in the midst of anger, I mean, wow, the power that we have as human beings. I mean, aggression is an amazing gift. Aggression is a miracle. It can do so much that contentment cannot achieve. So it all plays a role. And I do hope, I think I'm going to wrap it up on this note. I do hope that if you do feel the weight of what's going on, and it's confusing, and it's vague and foggy, and times still severe, of course, know you're not alone here. Know that there is light at the end of the tunnel, that we will get through this. But also recognize that what it's putting you through, I really hope that it's not just making you stronger, but giving you the opportunity to strengthen yourself and become a greater man or woman. Take good care.